All right, we are going to transition here back at our CPAC booth here at CPAC 2022 live from Orlando, Florida, joined by Senate candidate in the great state of Pennsylvania, Dr. Oz. Now, before we get started, I'm not going to ask you for medical advice today. I'm going to keep this strictly political.
Well, the reason is I tried to collect the copay. He wouldn't give it any.
That's pretty good. I like that. But we are joined by Dr. Oz, and just not too long ago, he kind of tossed his name into the hat to run for Senate in the great state of Pennsylvania. Now, I know you've been going around doing some town halls, meeting with the people of Pennsylvania, finding out what's concerning to them, what is on their minds. What are you hearing, and what do people want to hear from you as a candidate?
So the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is huge and an incredibly diverse and rich place. If you haven't traveled it, it's worth the trip, by the way. I do a little PR for my place. But people aren't coming to these pep rallies, which are quite large, as an effort to cheer me on, because they're not pep rallies. Right. They're coming because they're town halls, and they're skeptical. I would bet you that 90% aren't sure what I really am. They know me from television. They understand why they like me, but they're not sure that I have their values or that I'll fight for them. And they want me to prove that to them. And so over the course of these hour-and-a-half events, they'll ask me questions about, for example, simple ones. Am I pro-life? Yes. Am I in favor of the Second Amendment? Every law-abiding American citizen should be allowed to buy a gun of their desire. They ask me questions about the role of gender in schools, and what about people that I've been friends with, or even where I live. I mean, all the basic questions you want to have answered, so you know this person's for you. And then there's a bigger question. Once I understand that our values are aligned, what will you do about it? When you go to Washington, are you going to forget us here in the middle of Pennsylvania, or are you going to actually fight for us? And that's the question you have to answer with history. And I fought on the biggest stage there is. I fought big pharma, big tech, big agrochemical companies, the U.S. government on my show on network television. I've sacrificed all to make sure my audience was served, and I'll do the exact same thing for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And when people hear that, they move from skeptics to patriots who want to support me, and then they get engaged.
And so you're hearing the feedback from the people once you address all those topics, because in full transparency, many of our viewers, when we said that we were going to have you on, were very skeptical of that you're a true conservative. Why is he getting into politics, and does he really believe these things he's talking about? And I mean, you just kind of rattled them off.
You should be skeptical. The question
is that natural to be skeptical?
Yeah, you want to be. We're Republicans. We're conservatives. I'm not going to just walk in there and take over. You guys got to kick the tires on what I represent. The good news is I've got a big lead in the polls, because when people actually see me and we talk, they say, well, this is a really cool way of getting what we want done. And I want them to keep doing exactly that. The only thing we request is keep your mind open. Hear what we're saying. And by the way, push back if I'm saying things you don't like. But if we don't get to that point where we take powerful voices and let them serve our nation, that's a problem that we all are going to face.
Yeah. One of the biggest themes here at CPAC has been America First. Finding those candidates that have America First values. America First products that we buy, jobs, all that stuff. But one of the also questions is, do you support President Trump? Not only his policies, but him as a person, because a lot of people say they claim to like his policies, but they dismiss him as a person for whatever the personal reasons. So I ask you,
Well, I support President Trump, voted for President Trump, but I want to just emphasize the personality issue that when you get beaten up a lot, you need to be prickly, a bit of a porcupine to push back on that. Otherwise, you just can't get what you want to get done. So we're witnessing what happens when you're a happy-go-lucky president who doesn't pick a lot of fights and goes along with the far left side of his party. You end up with the Ukraine. And so if we want to have real strong leadership that can withstand the brutal gale force attacks of the traditional media, made-up stories about you, and continuous onslaught of people trying to stop your agenda down, where you're going to have to get a little bit more pushy. And I think that's what we witness. I don't hesitate at all from saying that our country was better off after 4 years of President Trump's leadership than we are even after 1 year. And I'm often asked about this question. I said, you can sort of tell who's leading now. It's quite different from what it used to be. Gas prices alone have gone up more than $1. And I bring that up because I mentioned that on a TikTok video. I've got a lot of people on social media, about 13 million. Please, DrOz.com, by the way, so if you want to see all the rallies and all the things I'm talking about. But I made this TikTok video. 2 million people watched it. It's me filling up my truck with gas, saying what I just said. Joe Biden, tell me why my gas prices are through the roof. I'm in Pennsylvania. We all know what the problem is. You're not letting us get the natural gas out of the ground beneath my feet. Well, they took it down. In what country do you get taken down for literally stating a fact? I put it back up again. Yeah. 7 million views later. they're still watching it. Because if we don't say what we see, don't fight with sometimes a bit of assertiveness about what we know to be right, then we're not the conservative Republicans that we should be.
Yeah, and so President Trump talked a little bit about that last night, of fighting back against what's common sense. And Glenn Beck did that the other night as well. You know, men cannot get pregnant. And there's no discussion. You just say, nope.
Doesn't happen. And male athletes, even if they decide that they feel like they're female, cannot compete against female athletes. It's not fair to the women who we've worked so hard to allow to be on equal footing. And yet, because the liberals are tied up in knots on this, they cannot protect women with the desire of helping biologic men who are transgender. These are the things that drive me and most Americans into a tizzy. We have to at least be honest with each other and not kowtow this. And yet corporate America, I believe, is cowardly on these issues. They don't want to mess it up. They want to just go along. Which is, again, please, if you're a conservative, say what you see. You're not alone. Other people believe you.
Yeah, and you just brought up another topic of the wokeness of corporate America. I like the fact that you said early on that you did fight against Big Pharma on your national TV show.
They pulled their advertising off the show. They come back because I'm the #1 show on health in the world.
And they came back because you have the audience.
Yes.
Right?
But they definitely pulled out. They did not like, and listen, this is not an indictment of Pharma. They brought us a lot of positive things.
Absolutely.
But if you're not doing it right, you should be held accountable, and we shouldn't be cowards about that.
Okay, let me ask you a question. You've got Big Pharma still advertising on CNN, MSNBC, knowing they don't have the viewers. So my question is this: are they less concerned about selling products to the audience and more concerned about pushing a leftist agenda? I would say, to your point, they advertise with you because you have the audience. I think in today's culture, I don't think they would. I think they're more about the agenda.
You know, I never thought of that. That aspect of it. It's
because how can they charge? If I'm a media buyer for a company, how can I justify placing an ad on CNN when I know they don't have the viewers? So I can only assume it's not about selling the product. It's about pushing and financing the agenda behind the left.
Well, they watch CNN in airports.
That's probably the only people that are watching at this point. Dr. Oz joining us here live at CPAC 2022, running for Senate in the great state of Pennsylvania. Now let's talk about election integrity. That has been probably topic 1 or 2 of every candidate. So I'm going to ask you the magical questions right now. And where do you stand on election integrity and making sure that our voting system is safe and secure?
In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, under the cover of COVID, they did all kinds of shenanigans, which without question invited mischievousness. I'm trying to be polite here.
Correct.
But there was, and I've heard countless times, specific evidence of fraud from people who were eyewitnesses to it. We have to do better. We're conservatives. We're the ones who stand up for institutions and make them appropriately work to serve us. So we cannot allow elections to proceed in the future the way they unfortunately went forward during the middle of the pandemic. And in particular, I'm concerned because in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, there's no voter ID. None. I can't even get a change before my campaign election culminates in November because you need a constitutional adjustment. There was an act passed that actually allowed everyone to get no excuse absentee ballots. Again, it invites fraud because people who don't know getting a ballot are being voted for. Maybe they're voting twice, or maybe they vote then, they want to vote against the ballot box, or maybe they never voted, but so they can't vote in the ballot box because someone else voted in their place. So you can see why it gets a bit confusing. And so you have tens of thousands of votes moving after the polls have closed, and everyone throws their hands up in the air and say, guys, does my vote count the same as everyone else's vote or not? Mm-hmm. It undermines our democracy. So I would argue, as Republicans, we have an obligation to push for voter ID across the board, chain of custody understanding. I don't like the ballot boxes being outside the U.S. mail because then it's not a federal crime when you violate that. Well,
I know that in certain states that mail-in ballots are actually unconstitutional in those states, and there might be some news coming out a little bit later on that. So here's another question. And I know that a lot of our viewers are watching us right now. There's a lot of America First. Final question for you. If you were a sitting senator in Pennsylvania, would you have certified those votes for Joe Biden?
I think by the time the votes had gotten through the entire process, and remember, what ended up happening in my Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is that there was not a timely and effective adjudication of what went down. So now you're in this legal quandary. And the question as a Republican is, am I a law and order guy? And once the law was broken at a place was way before I'm supposed to decide, sure, I didn't have a choice. And I would have voted to certify, to preserve our Constitution. We don't want to ever be in that situation again.
Okay, Dr. Oz. More information about his candidacy in Pittsburgh?
DrOz.com. Come visit.
I'll visit you after this to talk about medical and get a physical, maybe something like that.
Here's turning cough.
There we go. Hey, we got more from CPAC 2022 on this final day here in Orlando, Florida. Back to the general session.